I'm going to go ahead and start recording everybody. So just FYI, we're not streaming live to Facebook or anything, but it is recorded.
Should we give it another minute, Matt, 5 after, and then start?
Yeah, I think the only person I'm really waiting on was George, and I know he's in the process of getting on right now. So if you want to go ahead and start, you probably can.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Matt, do you want to introduce our new board members, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I wanted to introduce not potentially some new board members, but new consulted staff that we're bringing on board in this process. I first want to introduce, let's go with Matt Donahue. Can you wave on your screen and give us a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Matt Donahue, public finance banker and advisor for DA Davidson, working out of the Portland office, which since March has been my home, and recently worked with the city on a refinancing that went very well, and looking forward to working with the city on your public safety facility financing. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. And I also want to introduce Duncan Brown. Duncan, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, thanks, Matt. No relation. I'm Duncan Brown. I'm with PFM. Maybe you can see right there on my virtual background. We're a nationwide independent financial advisory firm working with local governments. I'm based in our Portland office and work with a variety of cities throughout the state. And we are the presumptive financial advisor for the proposed public safety financing, although I think we have yet to get an actual agreement put in place, but wanted to listen in and get up to speed nonetheless.
It'll be there tomorrow morning, Duncan.
Fantastic.
And then just two or three other people I want to introduce. Golgan, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, so I'm not even going to try.
Actually, I'm gonna just say that so my name is Turkish, and no one ever says my last name, and it's not interesting, except that one of the scientists that came up with the COVID vaccine has my same name. So it's Ur. And folks, I'm a bond attorney, which is a very narrow practice. I represent local governments in Oregon, primarily cities that are borrowing money for projects like yours. So I'm excited to work on this project for the city.
Thank you, Golgan. And then just two more folks I want to introduce. Jeff from McKinsey Architecture. Jeff, do you want to unmute yourself and introduce?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jeff Humphreys. I'm an architect. I'm one of the principals at McKinsey, and I specialize in the design and assessment for police and fire facilities.
Great, thank you. And then the last person I just want to introduce and put on the spot is Michelle. Michelle was not able to attend the last meeting, but you see her picture on her now. Michelle, did you want to just do a quick introduction of who you are and why you joined the police committee real quick?
Sure. So my name is Michelle Damus. I moved to St. Helens. We closed last December 13th, spent the first night December 31st. Wanted to do a lot of work on the house and got my wish because I've been out of work ever since. I actually have two I guess, career paths. I am the Screen Actors Guild, so SAG-AFTRA, local union president for Oregon and Southwest Washington, and I'm an actress and a stunt performer. And then I also work in the fitness industry. I have taught fitness classes, run 80 facilities across the United States at one time. Personal training. I am currently just started taking space at North Lake, underneath roof. For clients, we get the space all to ourselves. So if anyone wants to come train all by yourself, you can. And so, yeah, I have two lives and I love it here. I'm on the budget committee, was asked to be on this, and I'm super excited. So.
And awesome. In small world, I can endorse Michelle. Michelle's practically a physical therapist. She fixed my plantar fasciitis. Thank you, Michelle.
I was looking because you're so small. So I texted her, I'm like, are you on the St. Helens call?
Small world. All right, Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, first off, I want to welcome all the new people that are on the call today, and I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. I'm assuming everybody got them and read them. Do I have a motion?
I so move that we approve.
A second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say
Aye.
nay. Any opposed, please say nay. Our minutes are approved. And the next thing on our schedule is DA Davidson presentation, all about bonds with Matt. Matt,
And
you're on.
do you want me to make you host so you can share your screen, or?
Yeah, I think I could do that.
Yeah, I can put up the presentation as well, but you're welcome to do so.
Here we-
All right, you should have co-hosting abilities to share your screen.
All right. So. Give me 1 second. Please think. There we go. Let's see. All right. So does everyone see that now?
Yep.
Yes.
Slideshow? Okay, great. So this is a brief, on a very high level presentation about the options that a city in Oregon under its laws, how it can finance a project such as the one that you're considering. So there's a few different ways to go forward, and we'll go over what those options are, a little bit about how they differ, and some of the pros and cons of each. And then happy to take questions at the end and talk more specifically. So essentially, the city can finance using 3 broad methods. One is what we call a general obligation bond. That is one in which the city pledges an unlimited property tax levy, and those bonds are payable from a dedicated property tax levy on the city taxable assessed value on an annual basis. So it's the strongest security that you can offer to investors or lenders, and it also comes with an additional tax that can fund the debt service. So then there's what we refer to generally as a revenue bond. And so that is a pledge of a certain revenue of the city. Some examples are sewer utility revenues, or if you have a transient lodging tax. Any revenue that the city collects, it can isolate that revenue and pledge it to the repayment of debt service of a revenue bond. The third one is what we refer to as full faith and credit bonds, or full faith and credit obligations. And so this is a pledge of all legally available revenues of the city to pay back the loan, and it is payable from any legally available revenue source of the city. So going on to the next slide. There are some subtle differences in the use of the proceeds from these different types of financings. The project that you're considering, as far as I know, would be able to be paid for through any of these methods. So there doesn't seem to be much restriction for the city for this particular project. You can choose from any of the 3 for what you're considering. There's some different methods of authorization for each of these financing tools. The general obligation bond is the one that has the highest bar for authorizing, because it requires not only council resolution to place a ballot measure on the ballot of a certain election in either May or November, but then you also need a majority of voters that vote on that ballot measure on the election to approve it. The revenue bonds and the full faith and credit bonds don't require a voter approval process, although with certain revenue bonds can be a higher bar in that there is a provision where if a petition is collected that gets 5% of your citizens' signatures, they can force you to put it on the ballot. The full faith and credit obligation method is probably the easiest one that require just the resolution from the city council to authorize. Now, going through some of the pros and cons on a very kind of high level basis, as I mentioned earlier, the general obligation bonds are the strongest security, the lowest risk for a potential lender. And so that translates to the lowest interest rate for the city out of all of these methods. In addition, you don't have to take money out of your existing revenues in your budget, because you are creating a brand new revenue that is dedicated to the repayment of the bonds. And so that brand new revenue is the property tax levy, which is not limited by any of the Oregon constitutional property tax limits. However, as I mentioned in the last slide, it does require ballot measure election and approval. So that's a much bigger deal in terms of getting authorization than the other two methods that are council ordinances or resolutions. So the revenue bond is, as I said, pledged a dedicated revenue source that can be increased or managed by the council. So for instance, if you're pledging your sewer utility revenues, council has the ability to raise the rates in order to keep up with the debt service. So there's some flexibility there in not having to dig into the rest of the city's revenue sources to pay the debt service. It would be the weakest security of the options. And the city currently has a AA rating on its general obligation or its full faith and credit bonds. It wouldn't be impossible to have a revenue bond that would get up to AA rating, but I think it would require a lot of potentially restrictive covenants of the city in terms of managing its revenues, and the covenants could include a debt service reserve fund, which increases the cost of the borrowing. And in general, of the three methods, this one is most likely to be the one at the highest interest rate. The full faith and credit bonds, or the obligations, just as we went through with the refinancing, issuing full faith and credit obligations, the credit rating agencies rate the GO bonds at the same rating as the full faith and credit obligations, and vice versa. So they would have a AA rating as your GO bonds would, although the lack of the unlimited property tax pledge backup that backs up the GO bonds makes the GO bond a slightly preferable security in the market. So the GO bonds would have a lower rate generally than full faith and credit, but it'd be pretty subtle difference. It does not require voter approval. Repayment sources are limited to your existing revenue sources, but you can repay the debt service through any of the legally available revenues. So for instance, you could pledge your full faith and credit to the repayment of the bonds, but fund the debt service through a fee or sewer utility charges. But you would, if push came to shove, be legally binding yourself to dip into the general fund, for instance, or other funds, if that particular revenue was not keeping up with the debt service. So I hope that's a helpful overview. And anyway, I didn't get into the method of financing here, just kind of what your high level options are. I'm happy to discuss further and take questions if you have them.
Does anybody have any questions for Matt?
I do. Are the bond rates historically low like the mortgage rates, or?
That's a great question.
Yes, they are. They're extremely low. You know, it's at this point, I think we're kind of taking rates for granted somewhat, but because they've been low for a very long time. But they're at the lowest levels rates have been pretty much in recorded history for long-term tax-exempt municipal bond rates. So yeah, it's a great time to be a borrower historically.
Are those rates fixed or adjustable, or how does that work?
You could do it either way, but by far the most common method for municipal borrowings is to go out for a fixed rate.
Yeah, I would think so too, especially if they're so low.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, the municipal bond market can offer fixed rates out to 40 years. And if the bank lending market would be more of like a 15 to 20 year fixed rate term.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see one of these being chosen or being a much better avenue for the city of St. Helens than another one at this point, or have you just not delved into it far enough to be able to give us a good recommendation on which one you think would be the best advantage for the city?
Well, Matt and I have talked about it somewhat, and unfortunately, really the answer is it depends. So,
Okay.
Sure. You know, if you wish to go out to the voters and you feel confident that you can get a general obligation bond authorization from your voters, that probably puts you in the best position for the financing. And there's a couple of different ways that you could go that don't necessarily include you levying a property tax. You could just have that as the backup. But it really, I think, comes down to more about what the city's goals are and certain, you know, political considerations that would determine what the best path is for you. They're all three good. They're all three good options, I would say. But
okay.
The particulars get down into what you really want out of the financing, what you think you can achieve.
Okay.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are these ever mixed and matched? And then are payments made like quarterly? Are these
Yes.
also mixed or matched, or?
Yes, certainly. So there are occasions where you could go out for a general obligation bond up to a certain amount and then finance the balance with a revenue bond or a full faith and credit bond. And then the payments are generally semi-annual.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, that just came in.
George, your mic's on and we're hearing what you're saying.
I'm muted, George.
Okay.
Sorry, George, we could hear you in the background, so I muted you. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. Matt Brown, have you guys done any kind of an analysis of which way you're leaning towards going, because sitting here and discussing this with this board, we've got very limited information and
Yeah,
this is kind of catching us.
I'm going to go ahead
Are
and
you
share.
guys digging into that, or how are you proceeding?
We are, and I'm going to share my screen here in a second to give you some comparison numbers. And I want to preface that these are preliminary numbers, and these are based on preliminary estimates of the current facility that you're going to see later today. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple different options. So hang on one second. And Rachel or Joe or Brian or Duncan or Golgan, you're happy to interrupt me if you'd like. You should see a spreadsheet on your page right now. The first option we're looking at is the general obligation bond. And this is a rough idea to pay back the cost of the building over a 20-year option pay period. And so we're looking at 73 cents per thousand. And then I did a quick estimate based on what value of your house is and how much that would cost you in property taxes per year. So if you look at $350,000 over a 20-year period, it would cost you $255 per year. Obviously, if we were to look at a 30 or a 40-year bond, those prices would go down. I don't have those estimates right now. Matt Donahue's working on those. And so once I get those, I will add those into the spreadsheet. When Matt talked about a utility fee, that is similar to what many community members saw this past couple of years when we added a recreation utility fee for $2 onto our community members' utility bills. So this was something very new to community members. It was also something that the city council and myself and several other administrative staff heard some pretty kind of rough feedback for a few people. I wouldn't say it was a majority of people that were against it, but there were definitely a very few but loud customer or citizens that felt that either we shouldn't have done that, or two, it should have been something that was approved by the city as a whole before it was put on administratively. So when we're looking at the utility fee options, there are a couple things to consider. One, yes, the city council could make an administrative action to create a utility fee on its own, and it's just based on a majority votes. So it's 3 out of 5. That could be pushed off to the voters, and it could be on a ballot measure like in May of 2021 to ask the voters in St. Helens if they would be willing to accept a utility fee like that. And then the city council and you as an ad hoc committee and the city can say, yes, we did put it out to a vote and it was either favorable or non-favorable. When we talk about utility fees, I do want to stress that there are two options to look at. There's what I call a fixed rate, and then there's what I call an estimated dwelling unit rate. And so what I'm looking at right here is a rough estimate of EDUs, and this is a monthly cost, and this is the yearly cost, and this is a fixed cost monthly, and then a fixed cost yearly. So if I had to pay back $29 million over 20 years, so that way it's a little bit more comparable to the bond. EDU stands for estimated dwelling units. So a single family resident is 1 EDU. A duplex is 2 EDUs because there's 2 estimated dwelling units, but they may share a meter, okay? So this comes a lot into play when we have big commercial customers like Walmart. Walmart technically is 136 EDUs. So when we say that we're putting on a $10 utility fee to pay back a bond, that means that a single family residence would pay $10 a month, but Walmart would pay $1,036 per month. So when we look at a EDU version, we're taking that into consideration that people are charged by their EDU. When we look at a fixed version, that means what I'm looking at is that we're looking at straight accounts. So if you can see on the left here, we have about 4,700 accounts in our utility system. So that means every account is hit $10 every single month. It doesn't matter whether you're Walmart or you're a single family resident. Everybody pays $10 per month. So for a $29 million payback, and that's not the cost of the building. That includes all the interest and everything. So don't freak out too much that we're going to ask for, that we're going to be spending that much on the building itself. But if we did an EDU method to pay back what we were needed with the interest and everything, that means that a single family residence would pay roughly $204 per year. If we did it on a fixed method, they would pay $312 per year. Now, when you look at the bond, say a $350,000 house, they would pay $255. So obviously that's more expensive than the EDU option. It's less expensive than the fixed version, but it also depends on how much your house is worth. If your house is only worth $200,000, you're only going to be paying $146 per year, as opposed to $204 or $312. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a better sense of what you're deciding here. And when talking with Golgan and Matt and Duncan, we've had discussions about doing, if we did choose to do a utility fee, we would likely do a full faith and credit bond that is backed up with revenue from a utility fee. So from the city's perspective, we're looking at two different options. Do we go for a general obligation bond and just have it paid strictly by property taxes in 20, 30, or 40 years? Or do we go through a full faith and credit bond, and then do we add a utility fee on top of that? Then the next question is, should this be done administratively? Because as many of you are aware, we need a new police station, and it's something we needed 10 years ago, as opposed to even looking 4 or 5 years down the road again. But does the city council, do you make that recommendation to the city council to do this administratively? Or do you take the recommendation to the city council to do a utility fee, but also have it go out to the voters? That is another option that you could make as a recommendation. And I'm not sure if Rachel wanted to chime in. I know she's had some conversations with some of the members as well. Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to share?
At this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brian and Joe. I'm sorry, Janine, you had a question?
I have a question. About taking it to the voters, is it either one or the other?
Right. It's one and the other. And
two actions in the same.
Correct. So we're looking at basically two different paths. And then once you get on either of those paths, there's another couple options on one. So one path is the GO bond. And so that's the go out to voters, put it on your property taxes, and we just have to figure out whether it's going to be 10, 20, 30, or 40 years. Okay. The second road is going down a utility fee option. And that would be one, making a recommendation that you don't go for a general obligation bond and you want to go for a full faith and credit bond. And once you go down that road, then you have to decide how should the city come up with the revenue to pay that back. Now, staff is working on recommendations to do a utility fee to pay that back. You may, as a committee, find another option if you want to look at something else. I'm happy to talk about any kind of revenue that the city brings in. But that second decision, once you go down this road, is does the city council, should the city council take it to a vote in like the May supplemental election? Or should they do this all administratively and just put on the utility fee, build the police station, and get moving?
Okay. Matt, where does the timber revenue go right now?
Timber revenue right now goes into economic development. So we don't necessarily have I would say a 100% ongoing cycle of timber revenue. We are working towards that. The city has been doing a lot of forestry management and not cutting in particular years that way, so we can build up some of our inventory. That way, when we look at salmonberry, for example, we can cut, little section A one year, and then we replant it, and then we kind of work our way around. And then eventually we come back to section A once it's ready for grow, and then we can cut it again. So from our forestry management's perspective, we're not 100% there on being able to count on every section every single year, but we are close. And so that is an option if the city wanted to make that or if you as a committee wanted to make that recommendation. I will let you know that those funds right now, as far as the last few years and this current year, those funds have been dedicated to economic development, and those are going towards a lot of the professional service costs that we have for the waterfront development, as well as the new business industrial park, as well as the central waterfront, which is classically known as the lagoon. So researching that project along with the waterfront and industrial park.
Have we had a revenue, sir, have we had a revenue surplus in the last, say, 5 years? And what does that look like for the city?
The revenue surplus is pretty much non-existent, to be honest with you. We stretch pretty much every year, every dollar that we spend. And in all of my budgets, at least I try to be conservative with revenue and extra conservative with expenses. So usually when you're looking at our budget, revenues will usually come in a little bit higher than budgeted and expenses will come in a little bit low, and that's by design. But the city is definitely not flush with cash or extra revenue going around. Yeah, Diane.
Utility flat fee, you said we have some 4,700 accounts. Does that mean my house plus, I own 2 businesses? Are those each separate? So my tax would be based on the number of water meters.
That is correct. That is correct. So if you have 3 different accounts, you would get charged 3 different times.
Okay, so that.
Yep. Yeah, and for someone like you who does own businesses in the community, as well as other rental properties that may be owned and that kind of thing, this could vastly more affect those individuals like yourself, Diane, versus somebody else who's just a single family residence.
Thank you.
And the utility, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, although it's on the backs of the property owners if you're not putting it in utility, because renters won't have to pay anything.
Correct. Jennifer, I just weigh in real quick, and this is all anecdotal. Our number 1 calls for service in the city of St. Helens is Walmart. They're our biggest customers for police service, followed by the next 2 are apartment complexes. And again, I'm not, I have my own personal bias and what I would like to do, but this isn't up to me. So, but I just want, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, that historically, and I'm speaking on 33 years of law enforcement, this is anecdotal and I'm just not going to be politically correct. Renters usually have a higher use for police services, and I don't want to get in a debate of anything. So just consideration that the property owners would be paying out of their pockets for services they really don't receive in a roundabout way. And we're just not there yet as far as crime data and CCOM and getting us the empirical data we need for of how to combat that and reduce the calls for service. That's our main goal. But that's also a consideration, is that right now we have our top 3 customers that could be paying one flat rate that our citizens, the 90% of our citizens that never have any interaction with the police, and we like it that way other than community events. So again, I'd be remiss without mentioning that, just for consideration, is that, is it really fair that the property owners, take the brunt of this on? But then you got, like Diane had said, she has businesses and houses, and so then she has to pay more. So I just wanted to just put that out there for consideration. So thanks for letting me.
I totally agree, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. I do want to bring up 2 things that I see in the chat. Jerry Cummings had a question about explaining utility customers with no residence, such as Walmart, have estimated dwelling units where no one dwells. For businesses like commercial and industrial property, the EDUs is an estimate that our engineering department does, and it is based on the impervious surface on the property. So in Walmart, we take the actual size of the property and how much square foot of pavement they have. And that's what we use to estimate the estimated dwelling units for a place like Walmart. And then Judy Thompson had a question if urban renewal provides any revenue to this building. Judy, it is built in the urban renewal zone. However, right now the urban renewal plan does not have any plans or revenue to dedicate towards this project. And the city specifically built the urban renewal plan so that all of the money that was taken in from the urban renewal district is put back into the community in a product or end result that has tax revenue. So we're not taking money from you and just spending it on another public building that doesn't bring in anything.
Thank you.
I know Janine had a question and then Carmen. Janine, you're muted, so if you can unmute yourself.
I'm trying, I'm figuring this out. Hi, guys. No matter which directions we go, I would highly suggest letting the community know somehow that what we're doing, what's going on.
Absolutely. We're actually going to be doing polling at the end of November, beginning of December. Rachel, Joe, Brian, and myself have been in a constant communication with our polling agents, and they are the same company that the school district used to do their polling for their bonds in the last couple of years. So we will be doing those calls, and they will be about 400 to 500 people that will be called, and they'll have a number of questions that we're getting written and set up right now to be ready to do that.
Okay, yes, that would be great. I would like to see the community more aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and our whole
maybe a pros and cons of the current police station, and all the pros about the new police station and more that it will be.
Correct.
Just something out there. I mean, people have more time on their hands right now. They're more willing to read, to learn, to investigate, and since it's happening around us, around our home, yes, I would like to see more awareness out there for everybody, kind of thing. That way, they're not surprised when it is on the ballot or whatnot.
Yep, that's definitely something that Rachel and myself and Joe and Brian are working on with our polling to get those questions out there. And we also hope to have those questions and data back to you by the time we meet in December, so that will help you make a more informed decision. And so we are working on questions on what they may prefer and how much they're willing to go up. Do they prefer 20, 30, or 40? And all of those kind of basic questions that we hope the community will answer. And we'll give you more feedback to make an informed decision. And I see Rachel kind of waving her finger a little bit if she wants to.
Yeah, well, and I just want to chime in that, yeah, there needs to be a full community education campaign, and it needs to be a two-way dialogue. So really looking forward to getting that polling information, to hearing from you all. And as we go through this, yes, Janine, we're absolutely committed to like full public education and engagement on this.
So I know we have one more question for Carmen. We are going to have some time at the end. I do want to keep going because I want to respect Jim Band, who's the Oregon Police Chief, who I forgot to introduce earlier. So I apologize, Mr. Band. And then we also have Mackenzie Architecture is here. But I'm happy to stay on as long as anybody would like to answer questions at the end. So Carmen, did you want to ask yours? And then Aaron, is it okay if we wait till the end? Okay.
It is, but I definitely want to ask it of Mr. Donahue and Golgan. So
okay,
if they're going to be around at the end, that'd be great.
Yeah, if it's let's see what Carmen has to say, and then
Okay.
we'll jump to you real quick.
Just a quick comment about the utility fee piece. It sounds like that would hit all income levels in the city equally. So someone who is a low income household and is paying utilities would be paying the same rate that someone who is potentially a higher income. So it could have more of an impact on our lower income citizens potentially. And then the other piece that I'm kind of curious about, that I probably should know this, but I don't, is where our property taxes kind of fall compared to other communities that are nearby. Like, are we lower in property taxes, higher in property taxes? I should know this,
I believe we are the second lowest in Columbia County.
Okay.
To give you an idea, Scapoose's property tax rates is $3.22. versus our $1.90. So basically they get twice as much. Now, when those were set back many moons ago, the state, in a rough sense, the state did a rough audit of how much business income and property taxes were brought in from the businesses. So at the time when this property tax was done around the entire state, they looked at the Boise district, all the businesses that were here in St. Helens. And so now everything is kind of drastically changed, obviously. So there's never been an actual kind of reset. And I don't expect in my lifetime for the legislature to make any progress or changes on that. And I'm sure Rachel can attest to some of that. She works with the legislature on a more regular basis. But yeah, we have the second lowest tax rate in the county.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that context, Matt.
Erin, did you have your quick question for Matt and Golden?
I'll try to make it quick. It's absolutely an inelegant question, but it's bugging me, so I'm going to ask it. I understand how a proposal for bond measure, if we put it before the voters and then it's property tax based, how that would work. With some of the other options, I have some concerns about what you talked about, the legal obligations to service the debt. So if the current city council makes a motion and passes and says we're going to do this, wanting to make sure that there's good process and breaks and education about future city councilors understanding that they can't change the rules once. Do you see the inelegant question I'm asking here?
No, I don't think it's inelegant, Erin. I think it's a really good question. So if my answer is not responsive, please fast forward me. So regardless of what the structure of the borrowing is, so whether you go to the electors and you get voter approval for a GO, or you do the full faith and credit, or you just the revenue backing, you're going to have the city will be entering into a contract with investors. And because of that, the city is bound to meet the debt service requirements, whether that be through imposing the GO levy or using its general fund or imposing this utility fee. So that's something that will bind, the governing body until those bonds are repaid.
Excellent. Just wanting to make sure that everyone understands what that means.
Sure.
I think education of our public is great, but we also perhaps need to do some education of some of our leaders sometimes too.
Yeah, oftentimes we get new leaders when there's an issue that is very pressing to that person. And so they want to come in and change that right away. And that can have drastic effects.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Thanks to Erin for the question and answer, Golgan. I am going to introduce Jim Band right now. He is the police chief for Oregon City, and I want to sincerely apologize for skipping over you at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Band. But Rachel, myself, Joe, and Brian had the pleasure to walk through Oregon City's new police station, and I hope you had an opportunity to get a link to their little video that they did. That is something we are hoping and really looking forward to do for our city. But we wanted to invite him on there because Oregon City is a city that decided to use a utility fee and revenue bond, and Golgan was actually the one who helped on that process as well. So she can answer some of the financing questions that come up for that as well. But without any ado, I will hand it over to Jim to talk about Oregon City and their police station, some of the great things they've done, some of the pitfalls and stuff that they would say not to do, and anything else in between. So Jim, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of everyone's time, Chief Greenway asked me to sort of talk about kind of the process of how we got to a fee and how we made it happen. And so I'm going to kind of scoot through that information, and then any questions you have, let me know. When this city, probably like what I read about your city, we had spent a lot of time with people talking about building a new building and dabbling in it. And as soon as it got to the uncomfortable part about paying for it, everybody would run. And I sort of put some people together in the community who were, you're never going to fund something without making some people irritated. And so you sort of have to just decide, we need to set our jaw here and decide that we're going to get this done and move forward. And I had some people in the community, you know, the people who always show up at your commission meetings and who are very engaged. I know you have them in your city too. Those are the people that we kind of brought on board. So it wasn't just me, but kind of a group of people going out there and talking about why we just needed to get this done. We had always talked about doing a bond and raising people's taxes. One of the things that we're a county seat, so we had 42 county buildings in town, and they don't pay any taxes. And we were looking, you know, what other options were out there. And I knew that some cities had paid for staffing with utility fee. So I went to the commission and said, hey, I got this idea about paying for a building with a utility fee. Can I just get your permission to go out into the public and sort of sell it? And if people hate it, I'll come tell you they hate it. If people like it, I'll come tell you they like it. I'll come tell you exactly what the community says about it. So we went to we've got 12 organized neighborhood associations, the Business Alliance, the Chamber, anybody who would listen, and kind of talked about the building. I think like you guys, everybody understood we needed a building. And our sort of take was, there was a clock, you know, Oregon has ORS 455, 400, I think it is, Oregon Resilience Plan. It's a mandate without any money, but it does as part of Oregon being able to respond to seismic events. It was the state basically saying, look, if you have an essential needs facility by 2022, you need to have police departments, hospitals, fire departments. I think dispatch centers are on there. You can see the list. But we need to get this done because that 2022 date is coming, and in an unlikely event of a big earthquake, we want to still be able to operate. What we basically went to the community with was, if we were to do this as a tax, and so our overall project budget is building finished, and we're in it for about a month now, $23.2 million. The bond that we ended up going for was $16 million. So that was the amount that we were paying back. And so we had done figuring on exactly what that meant. If we went to the average house at the time, average homeowner, that would cost about $10 a month in taxes versus a utility rate of, we showed the option of $550 or $650 a month, and kind of gave the public that option of we could do it for $550 and it would take roughly 20 years. We could do it for $650 and it would take roughly 15 years. And here's the amortization table to show you the difference in the interest that we'd save. So as we went out and shopped this to everybody and kind of told them, look, we can do the tax way, we can do the utility rate. What do you think? People really appreciated the tax, or excuse me, the utility. I think more than anything else, because it was $650 a month versus $10. There were a couple, they liked the fact that it sunsetted as soon as the bond was paid off. They actually liked it. We chose the option of doing the flat rate to businesses. They liked it. It was more business friendly than having some sort of a increased rate for a business. There's arguments and reasons to do both. They are, you know, if you look at your shoplet calls, Home Depot, Walmart, wherever, there's a lot of usage there. But we said the same thing the chief was saying about apartment complexes. There's a lot of calls that come to apartment complexes, and having those people, they're still residents of your community, having some input on this was important. The public, what we went back, overwhelmingly, people liked the idea of the fee much better. There were still people here super irritated when they got their first bill, and we did a pretty good job of educating people. But what the public wanted our commission to know was that they only wanted the utility fee to be paid for the building. They didn't want us to take that money and use it for anything else, which I think the language kind of keeps you from being able to do anyways. But they wanted to make sure that it sunsetted once they wanted that verbiage in what was written for the utility fee. And the other thing was their choice was the $650 a month versus the $550 a month. We really stressed to them that we looked at public money the way we looked at our own money, and paying less interest. You know, taking another $1 a month hit was a good thing to do. The one thing I'll say that our city has, I don't know if your city does, but if we're going to borrow more than, I think it's $2 million, we have to go to the public to do that. So our commission enacted the utility fee, and then once that happened, we went out to the citizens and we had to put out a request for permission to pay back, to go out and get a bond and pay it back with this utility fee. And it went down the first time. It was the 2016 election. And we went back less than a year later. The only thing that changed is we were a little more creative about, people didn't understand the language. It was sort of confusing and they thought we were raising their taxes. But we went back, changed the verbiage so it was very plain speak and people understand, look, this is not going to increase your taxes. We're just paying this back with this utility fee. And we passed by, it was 78-point-some% yes. And I think that covers kind of how we did what we did in a quick nutshell. But if you have any questions, fire away.
How big is your city, and how many police officers do you have on your police force?
So our city is 30, just under 40,000, 38,000, something like that. We have 47 or 48 sworn. We have code enforcement in this building. They're attached to the police department. And then we have a commission chambers that we did here that also doubles as our municipal court chambers. And then on the other side of the chambers, we have the court staff, and I think that's 6 people.
How many square feet?
Size is 34,000 feet. We started at about 44,000, and basically the budget got the building down to 40,000 feet.
What would you not do again, and what do you wish you had that you don't have in the current building?
You know, not big stuff. It's just little stuff. We had to cut out a public meeting space. That was in addition to the court. Other than that, there's nothing that I would have done different. You know, little things, but not big brush stroke things. Our engagement with the community was really good. I think one of the things that was successful was I spent 6 or 7 months talking to the public about the utility fee before it ever got real. So rather than doing it and then begging forgiveness, we really went heavy on the front end. That movie or that short video, if you know, we're trying to figure out how do we in 2 minutes tell everyone the same story, and in the digital age, that thing was pretty effective. And I think that we were so heavy on the front end of engaging the community and then taking what the community said to the commission that it just made it really easy for the commission. And I think the other important thing that worked is, I think that sometimes, and I saw this in some other projects, this really is not, this is not really about employees of police station. You know, it is, but I mean, that's really important. But I think the thing that the public needs to understand is how victims are served and how people feel. You know, when you go to court or you go to the police department, you're generally not having a good day. And so anything that we can do to make that experience better, to better serve victims, you know, the employees are really, that's important too, and all those other things, but that was something that really resonated as we were educating and working with the community.
Okay.
On that note, Mr. Brand, there is a question in the chat from Judy. Did your new building help entice new officers and help with retention of officers?
It's, it is already, we've already, there's been a couple hirings. We just hired a behavioral health specialist, and it's that kind of stuff has been great. It is very hard to hire cops right now if you haven't known, and hiring laterals is huge. And that has been, you know, to be honest, when they say there's the 2 things that cops hate, the fact that nothing changes and change. there was some squawking about change and moving into a new building. And the second everybody walked into this place, it has been a lot of fun just to see how people feel, and also the community, the chambers and everything about a new building. I think it sort of has people excited about seeing things like that happen in their community. That's been a big deal.
Yeah, one thing we noticed with the one thing we noticed when we did the tour with Jim was their use of the building for council meetings. And that is something that we took back and had McKenzie Architecture kind of reconfigure and upsize a little bit based on that need, just because of the location that we've picked out. We thought it was very important to show the open windows and the government actually working in that building. But that was one of our big takeaways from our tour.
You know, I did think of one thing, Chris. I'm going to guess you're the city manager.
Chris is our insurance agent.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, if there's anything, there was probably no need for us to have not gone through on that first bond. You just, or the first time we went to the voters. We should have. You can never underthink how clearly you communicate to people, and the verbiage on that, which we knew it was confusing, and we worked with people like we were going to make sure that we were covering legally what we needed to cover. We also we probably deferred too much, just forgetting that our community doesn't. I think if people don't understand something, their reaction is just going to be to not like it or to say no.
So Jim, I do see Michelle's hand, but I do have one question that Janine asked just a second ago. What was the time invested from start to finish on the project, and what was your biggest motivation to move forward in the new building?
So I became the chief in September of 2013. And I pretty much went to work on it right away. That first 2016 was the first time that it went down, and then September of the next year, 2017, is when it got approved. So we've been in it for a month. So it's been several years. It took a lot more time to get the funding in order than it did to get the building actually built. I had two main motivations. One, I want to feel I take a lot of pride in what I do and where I do it. I take a lot of pride in the city. And I have always heard people say things like those, buildings like that, or, we're kind of a blue collar town. And it just bothered me that people thought that we somehow settled in this city because we didn't have the money of Lake Oswego or West Lynn, some of these affluent communities. I was really motivated to do that, just to sort of change perceptions because of pride in the city. And the other thing is, I'd been a chief for a couple of months, and we had an officer shot and killed the line of duty. And I wanted his name on the building. There were a lot of people trying to name things after him, and it just kind of doubled my resolve to get this building done, is because we wanted his legacy to be something like that, how he lived and what he stood for in this community. So our building is named after him. Those are my two motivations.
Thanks, Jim. Michelle, did you have a question?
It was more of a comment on the atmosphere that it creates and how it can change the perspective and be such a positive thing. Right now, my daughters are running pods of kids, and they just changed to a house that's very calming. They said that they have like 10 kids they're running, that their attitudes changed. The kids are so much calmer at this other house. So it can be such a calming effect for people that work there, for victims. And I think that we actually have a good opportunity with optics on with everyone in our community. For those who are upset about the term defund, there's obviously money going into this. And for those that want to see a change, this is a great way to say this is to have the victims have a better experience. This is to have a calming influence, a psychological effect of having a space that creates that type of environment. So that's what my comment was.
Any other comments for or questions for Jim? No. I see Carmen had a quick question that in the comments here, how do property taxes in Oregon City compare to St. Helens? Jim, do you know your property tax rates off the top of your head?
Higher than yours. 3-something.
3-something?
80 something, somewhere around there, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I just paid my property taxes a couple days ago, so I should know.
And then also her question, also how does median household income and home value compare between Oregon City and St. Helens? Jim, are you familiar with St. Helens at all?
Driven through there, that's about it.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe Rachel or Joe or anybody else, if they have more. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, you're in real estate.
Property is much more expensive in Oregon City than it is here. So I would say as much as 20%.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would say that, so our median home value is 456.
Wow.
And that is the Portland area that is, I think historically we were always lower. In these last few years, the market has been crazy and it's gotten so expensive downtown that everybody's moving out and everything's been going up.
Multiple offers on everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, I did have one question. Your website I thought was very polished and well done. At what point in the project did you guys put that out to the public, and did you feel like that was a really helpful tool to educate people? Or
yeah, so the funny thing about that is one of our officers who did that in a week.
Wow, that's great.
So he was a huge it's interesting because I'm not a Facebook person, but when we were doing our community education and when we were going out for our approval to the voters, there's a lot on Facebook and there's a lot of stuff that he did. That website looks completely different then. It was more educational about communicating to people what the utility fee and why a utility fee. That was the biggest question. There wasn't a whole lot about why you need a new building. We did throw that in there so people had an understanding of what that was, but I would say we over communicated. And there's no such thing in government, right? But I think that people are okay with being irritated with government. I had people call me irritated about the fee. And as long as I had good answers, I literally did not have a single person call me pissed about the fee that didn't hang up. I'm not kidding. That didn't say, I don't like paying more money to my water bill, but you guys really came up with a good plan and I understand. To a person, I think people just expect of government, they think you're not smart about how you spend money. You're wasting my tax dollars. And I think if you shove back and you have thought of everything and you have really good answers and people think you're thoughtful about what you did and why you did it, I think that's the key. And that was really the key for us.
Any other questions for Jim? Great. Mr. Band, I want to thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
You betcha. I will. Do you want me to stick around a little?
It's up to you. If I do have any follow-up questions for you, I can email you and then email those out to the group and everything. But you're welcome to log off and go home if you like.
Okay, I'm out. These McKinsey guys are good guys. We work with them. And so you're in for hopefully some good stuff, Jeff.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Jeff at McKinsey Architecture. Jeff, you should have control of your screen.
Yeah, let's see if I could do this. And
can you check your mic real quick? You're kind of coming in a little muffled.
let me jump out and then jump back in and see if that fixes the mic.
Okay. All right, so while we wait for Jeff to come back, I do see a couple comments and questions. One from Jerry. How will the rising number of estimated dwelling units affect those Excel formulas? Right now, with only 47 EDUs in the community and obviously growing community, obviously we add more houses, there's more bills. This is something where I have thought about is in the future years as we grow, this will likely be something that will at least be checked once a year during the budget year process to ensure that we have enough money to cover the debt service payment. But if we are continuing to grow, obviously if you have more houses, the fee goes down. So if we only, if we, in the first year, let's say we have to charge, $12. If we add, like another huge apartment complex that's coming in, or many other developments that are coming in, it's possible that the next year it could go down to $11.50 or $11. So as the number of houses or EDUs increase, the fee goes down a little bit. But that also depends on the debt service schedule that Matt and Golgan and Duncan help with. If we do a utility fee based, I would likely set up the debt service payment so there is pretty much flat as possible for this instance, so that we're not having to adjust rates every single year that are dramatic. And Matt just reported that the Matt Donahue got on the internet and found out that Oregon City's permanent tax rate is $4.409 per thousand. So $4.40 per thousand. Hey, welcome back, Jeff.
Yep. How's about the sound check now? Good?
Much better.
Okay, good. Awesome. All right, let's.
All right. You should have co-hosting abilities.
Yeah, let's try that. And can you guys see that?
No, we cannot. Yes, we can. All right, there it is.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. So giving you guys a quick overview, Matt distributed some of the work that we had done, which test fitted several sites, but we're going to go back kind of down memory lane here. One of the first things that we actually do when we do these facilities is develop a program. And so there's several steps associated with that. The first and foremost is working with key staff to identify what the spatial needs are. And our focus is really on the operational needs. So we develop questionnaires, we send those out. The Chief Greenway was kind of the champion on pulling together those pieces of information. Those deal with staff count, the types of rooms, and then from that information, then whether the use or the equipment, we put together what the sizing is based on that. We've done more than 35 different policing facilities, so we bring a history of past projects that we can use to kind of hone the conversation. And so you should be seeing kind of the summary page here of the police department. And so the end result of us going through the questionnaire and interviews with key staff was developing the spreadsheet. And so once we were done with that, we went through and evaluated it and made adjustments based on those conversations that we had with Chief and his staff. And then to help validate that, then we actually went out and toured 3 recently completed facilities. And the objective in that is literally to kind of either confirm the information that's already been gone through with the programming or challenge it so that we can make adjustments associated with that. The 3 different facilities that we toured with the PD included the Lebanon Justice Facility, which had a courtroom, a dedicated court facility associated with it. And then we toured Sherwood, which was, I believe, the older of the 3 stations that we'd actually toured. And then the last one we toured was Westland PD. And at the conclusion of Westland, we got together again with Helens PD here and went back through the program to get the program honed and made adjustments as appropriate. So not only did those tours help us with the validation of the program, but they also allowed us to kind of look in the PD to look at the adjacencies, the flow of the space, and how those buildings were actually holding up as far as the materiality choices. So giving you guys the overview of this, we were projecting a need of just over 20,000 square feet for I'll zoom in here, for the 20-year projection. The objective is to build a facility that's 20, 30, 50-year facility so you don't outgrow it after you've been moved in after a short period of time. And there are several columns you can see here. So over on the left side, we're actually looking at the staffing projections. So right now we have a staffing projection of 24, and over that 20-year growth, growing up to 40 staff members that would be occupying that space. So at move-in, we would need a minimum of 19,000 square feet, and you can see it kind of grows to get to the just over to 20,000 square feet. There are certain monument pieces that you would actually have in a building that wouldn't necessarily change. You would want to actually have that space so you're not having to add on after you first move in. And some of those might be things like the locker rooms. If you don't build enough space for the locker room, you can't add on to the building later. So that's some of the difference that you see between the move-in square footage and the full build out square footage. So this is the landing page. We also look at what the site requirements are, and that's what the square footages are there. And that includes the public parking, that includes circulation on space, that includes the secure parking, and the size of the building itself. And so that helps us identify the size of sites that we should be looking at. And so when we went through and test fitted a number of the sites, this was the square footage that we were looking at for. So the total square footage that we were looking at for a site was just under 60,000 square feet. The program gets into a level of detail. So we've broken it into these 4 major pieces. So the public spaces in this light blue, police operations division. We had an interview kind of separated out from that, and then facility support. So those are the 4 major elements that we actually broke the project into. And Matt, you could hurry me along if I'm getting into too much detail.
Yeah, I guess we can probably open it up if there are any questions regarding the needs assessment. I think I was pretty thorough when I sent this out about how we got to the document, what the document looks like, and kind of those requirements. But if anybody does have any questions, please raise your hand or wave somehow.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like we're pretty good. So you can
perfect.
Probably move on.
Okay, so yeah, there's a number of pages associated with it. I just gave you the overview on the landing page. So after test fitting the sites, this was the site that was the preferred site for development of the new facility. It's at the intersection of Castor Road and Old Portland Road, and north is up in this diagram. And so this one fit the bill for a few different reasons. There was 18 different criteria that you saw in the needs assessment that Matt had sent it out. And one of the ones that's nice about this is the city already owns this the site. So that was one of the things that actually kind of drove this site. We looked at 3 different scenarios of how the site could actually be laid out. And the first one that we started out with was trying to maximize minimizing the building footprint and maximizing how we would lay out the site from a parking standpoint and a flow standpoint. So that was a 2-story building. After consideration, the PD and city staff decided that was really not the best direction to actually go with. So we went through and we developed a few different scenarios associated with how we could develop a single-story building on the site. This was the scheme that was identified as being the best scenario between those different options that we went at. And so just giving you an orientation on it here, the public parking is kind of on the front portion here on a new right-of-way that would come off of Castor Road. We're using the building mass itself to screen off the secure parking on the back side of the building. And then there's 2 access points. So while the public could actually come in this way and park here and then come back out, continuing down this new right-of-way, authorized vehicles could actually come into the back portion of it. And then we actually have a secondary means of being able to ingress and egress from this. And that would be to come out this way and either circulate this way or back up to Old Portland Road here. Just to orient you, we have an apartment complex over here. There's a bar and grill, and then there's a rec center across the way. And then you guys probably are looking at this roundabout thinking like, that's not the way that is. This is a future roundabout. So we're showing the orientation and the line work that has been proposed so that you can see how that would relate to this new structure or vice versa. And just giving you some numbers over here, if I zoom in, We're looking in the mid 60s for secure parking, the parking count there, and just under 40 parking stalls for the public parking. It's a 2.3 acre site of total area, but we're developing a good portion of that. And we have some wetlands. I won't get into the details of it, but there's a wetland over here, and we've got some setbacks that we're very carefully kind of navigating away from, so we're not having that negative impact on that. Let's see, yeah, the public parking here, you can see this kind of strip in here in a slightly different zone. So this is kind of a dual purpose. You can see we have it labeled here as a public plaza. So what we're envisioning is that would actually be largely, if I zoomed into this one, probably have bollards to restrict access through that. And this would actually provide some level of breakout space from the community room and courtroom. And for future events or whatnot, these bollards could be removed. There could be an access to come through there. And again, this is also a secondary means for ingress and egress out of the secured parking. Other things that I can share with you before we actually rotate to the floor plan would be the shape of this building. So what we've done is we've actually bookend on this side and this side a carport. So this is where all the first response vehicles are actually parked here. So this dashed line you can see here is the roof line up above, protecting those vehicles from frost and rain if they're transporting evidence or their gear to and from the patrol cars into the building. Let's see, we've got some service elements on the backside over here that are the trash and the emergency generator and transformer. Those are protected from secure walls that screen them out from the public right of way, so they won't be vandalized or damaged. I think that gives you pretty much the overview of site. I can ask if there's any questions associated with that before we move on to floor plan.
Yeah, Jeff, I just have a couple. Yep, I just have a couple comments. This is Matt. Judy Thompson had a question. I do want to address the roundabout that you see is in our transportation plan. That is not going to be funded with the building of the police station. So it will still be a four-way stop until this project is funded. Judy had a question, how are the big semi trucks going to navigate the roundabout? The roundabout that is designed in our transportation plan does account for semi trucks and going around. That probably gets into a little bit more detail of planning and engineering than I am at liberty to talk about and probably give a wrong answer. So, but just know that, Judy, we do plan to have that access available for semi trucks still to go around that roundabout.
Great. Okay. I will now move to what we call an adjacency diagram. So pretty much what we've described to you is we design these facilities from the inside out to try to make sure that we're achieving all the operational needs of the facility. So after we've kind of test fit the site to make sure that the building will actually fit on it, we actually really focus on the inside before we come back out to the outside. So I'm kind of giving you a sneak preview of the site diagram, but know that came after this effort did. So here you can see these colors, and these are actually kind of color coordinated back to that program. And so I'll just give you a quick overview. This is the main entrance for the public. And the light blue areas are either spaces that are accessible to the public and or that they would interface with. So the public would actually come in, there would be a vestibule, they would have a lobby. Off to one side would be the courtroom and community room. Off to the other side is a training room. So you have really two large public rooms. This training room is really a dedicated training facility or room for the PD. But by positioning it here, it actually has dual purpose. So that's that. Records, this is kind of behind the secure line here, but this, as the public comes in, this staff would be the people that they would actually be greeted by and actually have to speak with before to file a report, to speak with an officer, that sort of thing. And then the other colors are kind of the back of house type of things. So this is where all the staff really reside. So this is your detective, your administrative leadership and patrol. And then the gray spaces are support rooms. And then we have evidence in that kind of orange or peach colored space. And then here you can actually see that carport. We've got 7 or 8 vehicles that are actually covered in that carport there. And then there's 2 different means for authorized staff or officers to come into the building. One of them's through this space, and the other one is directly over here toward evidence. So that gives you the orientation, if you would, for how the adjacencies are. And now
Jeff,
I'll go in. Yep.
Hey, Jeff, can you quickly explain what a vestibule is for those that don't know in that beginning section?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have two. So this one, you'll see it actually has 911. I think this is where Matt was actually alluding to. And so, and a lot of the law enforcement facilities that we work in or design, we actually have a vestibule that's dual purpose. Number one, it's an airlock that provides a means to keep the conditioned space conditioned and not bring in the outside air or let the conditions air outside. The other function of it is it's a lockdown vestibule. And so if somebody, their significant other was abusing them, they could actually come to the police station, they could go in through the first set of doors, hit a panic button, and it locks the door behind them with magnetic locks. And this is a pretty common thing that's actually done in police facilities. There's instructions on how to actually operate it, but it's literally pretty simple. It's a button and it locks the doors behind them so people can't get in there. The inside doors then could actually be accessed by officers, so they can actually come in and assist that person there. So that's the two purposes for that. The other thing I'm going to share is as we kind of migrate over to this vestibule, which is described as mud or mudroom on this backside, something with the pandemic that we have actually seen, this is something that we've been doing in our fire stations for quite some time, and we've now migrated this over to our police facilities. And the idea that when first responders are coming back from their shift, their duty, their call that they were actually on, you transition through an atmospherically separated space. And so there's a hand washing station there. It's on the path of coming back into the building. It's pressurized so that you can't get air from outside coming into the building. And then you have a walk-off mat that's just naturally scrubbing the boots as you go through it. And the space is set up to be a minimum of 10 feet in length so that you get a few scrubs as your boot goes through there. And the idea, again, is just kind of, it's a natural thing. It just happens. It's part of the workflow that you would actually do when you come into the building. I highlight that because the other thing that we've seen with these lockdown vestibules are most public buildings are now not available to the public. And these vestibules are a means for people to actually come in and actually hit an intercom and actually speak to somebody inside the building without the building having to be opened up and putting the first responders at risk.
Facilitated so they stay on time. I'll tell Chris.
Does that answer the comment that you were looking for there, Matt?
Yep, thanks.
Okay. All right. And we can come back to these. So
I am still on Zoom.
First thing that we try to do is get those adjacencies right. And we're trying to move, court goes here and admin goes there and not worry about where doors are and windows are and those sorts of things. And once we get that dialed in, as you saw in the last diagram, then we actually go in and we start to work through the detail. And each of these things take a few passes to actually get to the point where we have an approval from the PD and city staff. And so this is the diagram that has been approved based on the adjacencies. And so it's still color coded the way we had described before, but now you got the detail that shows you how the spaces actually work. So I'll just zoom in here. So this is that lockdown vestibule that we just described. And so the public would actually come into this space. You can actually see now a layout of a seating group for people that were waiting in the lobby. This here is a glass transaction counter. So it's atmospherically separated. It's a bullet resistant wall and glazing to keep record staff safe. Again, immediately off to the left is set up for court. It could also be city council. It could also be community usage. Over on the right side is the dedicated training room for tactical training for the PD. It also has dual purpose in that it also can serve as an EOC, an emergency operations center, as well as being available to the public. I had talked before about this plaza area on the outside. And so here you can start to see some level of articulation for how the outside surfaces would be treated. And you'll see here in a rendering that we're going to show you coming up that the idea would be to really create a level of transparency here so that there's a visual connection to the government at work and the possibility of having a breakout space with doors to come from this space directly outside. if that is appropriate for the function that's actually occurring. So I'll continue on through the other blue areas here. So this is the court clerk. So you got people that are coming in and they're there for traffic court. On the way back out, they pay their traffic fine and be off and running back to their daily life. On the backside are other rooms that are supportive of the court function. So if you had a jury trial going on, this is a jury deliberation room. So you have direct access off of the courtroom here. They have their own dedicated gender neutral toilet room off of that space. And then we have a dedicated office for the judge, attorney, and then a conference/evidence release space. So these are all back of house. There's a secure point right here at this door. And so if you're authorized, you can come through that door. If you're not going to get through it. Let's see. So that is the blue areas here. We've got some toilet rooms and some kind of support rooms that are also available to the public off the space, but out of the immediate public area. We described kind of the business end of the station. So I'm going to share with you the control points are this door here that I talked about before, this door and that door. So those doors are all on proximity card readers. So they're preventing unauthorized access into those spaces. Officers can pass through this space without any issues one way or the other. The purple areas that we had described before. So this here is the detective suite. So we have a number of workstations that are set up for the detectives with growth for their staff, as well as a dedicated large conference room and then a sergeant space. And then these four offices here are the administrative staff for the PD. So you can see the chief, sergeants, and the lieutenant. And then immediately off to the right of those spaces include the patrol officers area. So these are not necessarily assigned workstations. The officers that are on duty when they're transitioning between shifts, this is where they would actually do their report writing. So that's what these 6 workstations are. And then there's a communal table here in between them. We've got a work area here for copy and different paperwork. And then this is kind of the hub of the station. The whole idea here is to have this very visually open. So again, strong connection to the outside and glass along this side, somewhat screened from the public. And then this, a lot of glass on it to provide some level of visual connection through the station. The gray areas are some of more the utilitarian spaces. So we've got a break room, we got the electrical room, all the stuff that nobody talks about, but they're really important to make sure that the building's going to function correctly. So we've gone through and actually sized those appropriately. We got like a fire riser room and that sort of thing. This is that mud room that I was describing before. And so I'm going to zoom into this. So when officers come in, all these are cubbies. So this is where they put their duty bags with all their gear in it. And then on this side over here, that is a hand washing station. It's a stainless steel counter. These doors are somewhat misleading. They're actually automated doors. When an officer approaches it, it senses their proximity card and the door will automatically slide open, kind of a Star Trek-y kind of thing. I only highlight that because we do that because it's difficult with the officer with their sidearms or their rifles and their duty bags and stuff. They got a lot of things in their hands, and so to try to push a door open is kind of a challenge. So having those automated is actually good. And now with the pandemic, it's also good because they don't have to touch the door. So that's how that thing actually works. Moving over here, we've got some hard interview rooms. So they have a detainee in. This is where they would bring them in. And we have access directly from the outside as well as the interior. The green space here is the K9 units. And then this space over here is the property and evidence area. So we've got a few different spaces there. If an officer comes in with evidence that needs to be processed, they would actually come into this space over here, OFC officer side. They would process that. They would put it through pass-through lockers. The evidence tech would take that and process that. And then it would actually go into storage over in this space over here, labeled evidence storage. If they had a vehicle to process, that's what this space is here. So we've got a few vehicle spots, if you would, in there. It's sized to actually have up to 4 SUVs into that space. And then the last space to kind of hone in on this is the locker room and the fitness. The fitness room is kind of a modest space, but it is an important thing for officer wellness. And the other thing I wanted to highlight here is, and this is another thing that we do pretty regularly on fire stations, and in the Pacific Northwest, it's just now starting to gain some popularity. And so I commend the chief and city staff with the idea of going with this communal lockers and general neutral toilet rooms. What we have seen is about a 30% reduction in space when you take that approach, which is a really good cost saving strategy. So that's what this space is. So this is it's not a locker room. It's a place where you store your gear. When you're changing, you would actually go into one of these 4 rooms to shower and change, and then you bring your gear back to the lockers that are in the space here. So that's it on the floor plan. Any questions on that one before I move on to the next year?
Just one thing I do want to mention, Diane Dillard had a question. Is it Leeds building environmentally friendly? And I know Jeff can probably speak a little bit to this, but I do want to mention we did not design the building currently to take Leeds certification into consideration. However, that was a question that came up during our polling questions. So we are planning on asking if the community feels that this is important to do. And the committee itself can also give their comments on if the building should be constructed in a way that will provide LEED certification at, I think there's 3 different levels of those, if that answers your question, Diane. And Jeff, I'm not sure if you want to make any comments.
Sure, yeah, no, I could make a couple of comments on that one. The first and foremost is, in the state of Oregon, public projects are required to spend 1.5% of their total construction cost for green technology. So that is something that's being forecast in for this project. A lot of times that manifests itself into photovoltaic panels that help offset some of the electricity demand for the space. So I can share with you, this building probably will be nearly completely covered, the roof be covered with PV panels. They're that cost effective, and so your dollars are really stretched. And so we usually have problems finding enough space to put all the panels on the roof. The other thing I wanted to share with you is the state of Oregon has continued to be very progressive in our energy code requirements. And with the new ASHRAE 90.1 2016, that's the energy code, it's actually more restrictive than LEED. And so by meeting the Oregon's energy code, I can share with you that if you were to go through LEED, you likely would score really well, meaning like silver or higher. So then it comes to a decision for the city in that, do you actually want to get a certification, or you just want to shadow a program to know how you performed related to that? And we do that quite regularly. We're working with the city of Lake Oswego and their police department right now, and they are very progressive with their ideas about sustainability, and that project shadowed LEED. And we could say that if it went through the program, it should have achieved gold, which is the second highest level that you could actually get. So definitely we can incorporate the sustainability into the project without any issues. So, okay.
And then Jeff, I just want to make you aware on time that we are scheduled to be done at 5:30. I know we're going a little bit late, but everything went a little bit long, but just want to give you a heads up.
Thank you. Last slide, everybody. So short of questions on it. Again, working from the inside out, after we figured out what the footprint needs to be and how we got those flows, then we start looking at what the outside of the building is going to be like. And we went through an exercise with city staff, including the PD, looking at different buildings within St. Helens and other example structures that are either civic structures and or police departments to draw inspiration from. And so we had city staff kind of give us some comments based on those images that we were made available to them. And that helped us kind of hone 3 different approaches. This is the one that was actually selected for the exterior. And I can share with you that the things that came out of it was, let's try to have a connection to the past, but being that we're dealing with a transitioning kind of context, especially in this site location, let's try to look at something that's kind of a modern adaptation of it. And so the idea on this, as you can see, this is a Columbia River basalt. This harkens back to the county building and the city hall building in the downtown core. And then this lighter tone that you see on the underside of this floating roof plane here is a cross laminated timber. So we've introduced this nice wood element, which is kind of harkening to the Pacific Northwest. We're using dark materials. So this kind of brown tone here would likely be a metal panel. And then this gray, this dark gray tone here, we're looking at like a masonry or a terracotta, which is a very traditional looking material, but the way we actually describe it or showing it there is kind of a more of a modern kind of adaptation of how that material might be. In the massing, what we've actually done is this high volume that we've done here, that actually goes over the top of the lobby space. This is the entrance here for the public. And then the better part of this side over here is where that community room and courtroom space is. And then we got back of house spaces on the courtroom. And then this is where the evidence area is. And then starting at this line, moving that way, that's the training room for PD and the PD offices. Last thing I'll just note is this is, again, that kind of look at how we might be able to start to kind of create some kind of a public plaza or dual purpose space. And so that's how we've treated that. We've got these planter areas that are dual purpose. They're one, creating some level of greenery, but they're also creating vehicle barriers to prevent any misfortunes, accidental or otherwise, toward the building. Yeah, so that's an overview of the exterior. That's all I have for you guys, short of any questions you might have for me.
Anybody have any questions for Jeff?
I think it's gorgeous. Did a great job.
I agree.
Yeah, that's one for the planning commission.
Yes.
I like it too. I do have a little bit concern regarding, since it rains so much here, I foresee it raining onto the doors as we try to open. Maybe more covering of sorts.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I choose not to say something, and then when somebody asks a question, I go, darn it, I should have said something. So
I know I have that
we actually
problem
have a
with my
lower,
house.
it's hard to, actually, you guys can't see what I'm pointing at anymore, can you? Did you pull
Oh,
that up?
you should still have ability to share your screen.
Okay, all right, let me just.
It's easier to have conversations when nobody is sharing screen though, so I turned you off.
Yeah, all right, let's do that. Okay, and share. Can you guys see again?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so Janine, this here is a lower roof area. So that is, I'm gonna say is in the 10-foot high range. So this one's kind of more ceremonial. To your point, it probably wouldn't provide a lot of weather protection from the rain because of its height. But down here, this projects out about 8 feet from the face of the doors and is down at about 10 feet. So it should provide a pretty good level of protection there. And we get into you know, the latter phases of the project or the next phases of the project, we can kind of hone that a little bit. But I'm pretty confident that that should provide a level of weather protection for people coming in and out of the building.
Okay.
And since you are on that picture real quickly, I know Judy had a question earlier, and I can't remember, Judy, if you emailed that question to everyone or not, but did you want to bring up your comment that you emailed?
Yeah, it was just about perhaps creating some sort of a sculpture or water feature or something out front that recognizes like past, present, future, who we are, what we are, something that represents our community. I see a fundraiser with that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and just so the committee knows, I had mentioned, replied back to Judy with thoughts of the Arts and Cultural Commission taking on a project similar to that once the building potentially gets going.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Matt.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff before he exits our meeting?
Thank you, Jeff. You did a good job. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me tonight. We've been
I think
working on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff, real quick, Carmen does have one question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick question. The planning was for 20 years out, but I imagine this building is going to be housing the police for much longer than 20 years. Has there been thought of how that future expansion could work since we're putting so much money into this building now?
Yeah, and maybe this is a two-part response. So Chief, I can respond initially, and then maybe you can add a little bit more detail to it. So we projected out what the staffing count would be for that. The expectation would be the choice of materials and what we're doing. The building would have a life that's more like 50 plus years. Generally with policing facilities, what we see is most of the growth that would actually occur is probably going to be patrol officers. And so the patrol officers don't have additional office space. Those 6 workstations that I was sharing with you, it's like the ones that are on duty, they're using those spaces. And when the next shift comes in, they're actually using those. So that gives the flexibility of being able to grow beyond the 40 officers that we're currently projecting.
Yes, 100% agree, Jeff. And we could, you know, it's been done before and we're doing it now currently. I mean, sadly to say is that, you know, we can double up areas and, you know, I'd rather have the staffing, you know, and then worry about the issues. So yeah, for Carmen, to answer your question, 20 years is a good start. And then afterwards, you know, that's, if we get this facility, which I'm positive we will, you know, 20 years from now, who knows what St. Helens will be. I know it's going to grow like a weed on steroids, but we'll be able to accommodate past 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to comment that I think it's a great looking building and I love the utilization in it. And of course, Jeff, I got to say, I love the fact that you incorporated some fire service knowledge to it.
Right on, George.
By the way, nice beard.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it's new. I haven't seen this.
I haven't seen that. That was a new one.
I think it's funny that you still call them cubbies for police officers.
Yeah.
Old habits never die.
I see, I don't want to miss any questions. I know Diane put a question in the chat. Did you think about roll down protective panels in case of protesters?
I can share with you a few different things related to that. So we haven't got to the level of detail yet to work out a lot of specifics, but typically the glass that's actually facing the public ways are actually going to be ballistic rated glazing. And then the choice of these solid materials, you heard me talk about terracotta or masonry. There's a reason why we use that material, even though it doesn't have a UL listing for being a projectile resistant material. It is. It's very, very dense, and it would be difficult for projectiles to actually get through. So those materials would lend themselves very well to resist anybody that was trying to break in or damage the building. And then there are things that we can do to prevent it from being vandalized, whether those are graffiti guards and those sorts of things. And that's something that will be coming in a future phase here as we get into that level of detail.
Great. I don't see any other questions.
Great. Well, thanks again for your guys' time. I appreciated it. Like I said, we've really enjoyed working with the city so far on this. It's a great project. You guys are in need.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Is there any other discussion before we talk about our next meeting and then adjourn?
I just had one. I was curious about how many of the committee members have toured the current police station. Has everybody done that?
I think last time I spoke, Jose, who's one of the sergeants, mentioned he had given about 10 or 12, I think, actual tours.
Yeah. If you haven't, I'd really encourage you to do that.
It'll definitely be part of the video. Janine, did you have a comment?
No, just volunteering that no, I have not yet. I have been inside the building as a CERT member, different areas, but haven't taken a full-on tour, and I should do that. I need to do that.
Yeah, you can contact Jose at the police department and he can set up a time.
I live a block away. I have no excuse.
Oh.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. I'll get on that.
And I do want to stress too, staff is currently working with the polling agency to get that started. That will happen at the end of November, beginning of December timeframe, week of the 30th actually. And we're in the middle of reviewing. We'll get to review questions very soon here and meet with them again and finalize that. And we hope to have all that data back to you by your December meeting.
Hey, Matt, just to circle back on something, I was able to run some rough calculations about the property tax rates at those different terms. So the 20-year scenario was at 73 cents per thousand. If you go to 30, that brings it down to roughly 51 cents per thousand. And if you go to 40, brings it down to around 43 cents per thousand. So some diminishing returns in terms of lowering the rate as you go further out, because your interest expense grows a lot if you go out that far. But that's the kind of range, 20 years at 73 cents per thousand, down to 43 cents per thousand for a 40-year scenario.
All right, I get to geek out tonight on some spreadsheets. Yeah.
You send your spreadsheet out, Matt. Do you mind
Yeah,
sending that? Okay, thank you.
You want to know all the secret formulas, don't you?
I do. I just want to look. I want to play around with it.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Matt, when are you scheduling the next meeting for? Do you have that yet?
Yep, next meeting, I will send out a invitation to you tomorrow with the link. It is going to be December 15th. It's the third Tuesday of December. Same time, 4 to 5:30. And the plan is that at this meeting, we'll have some discussion. If you guys want to invite anybody back that spoke this meeting or the previous meeting, or any specific questions, we can always have Matt Donahue and Duncan here as well to answer any questions that you may have as far as the bond or financing, anything like that. But the idea is that at the December meeting, you as a committee would make a recommendation to the city council on a first or potentially second option. And Chris and George would then take that to the city council meeting at the first meeting in January.
Okay, anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody, for attending.
Good information. Good meeting. Good stuff.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yep,
Hey,
thanks, Matt. Bye-bye.
Yep.